couldn't. I love the night. That's the only time I feel really alive.
That's what David wanted.
Blood, I was to find, was a necessity as well.
A vampire in love with a slayer. It's rather poetic. I am the monster that breathing men would kill. I am Dracula.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down, and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Lena Nazari, and I have to just start this out by saying I'm so sorry this video is late, but I thank you all for bearing with me. There was an illness in the house, and I had to take care of people, but everybody's good now, and it's safe to just be away for a couple hours and know that everybody's going to be okay. So I'm trying to get this out as soon as possible. And again, thank you so much for being patient with me. I would love to tell you it's because I was locked in writing my next book, but nope. That's also taken the back burner. But I promise I'm looking ahead. I see a couple days where I can literally write all day. So the plan is to try and still get the book out this summer. I obviously will keep you updated. Please follow me on Instagram. That's where you're going to get the latest updates. You can go to lenanazari.com and join my famed family. And I'm going to start sending out some updates again now that life has calmed down a little bit. And if you'd like to see me in person, right now, my confirmed appearances are Fan Expo Philly in May and Galaxy, I almost said Galaxy Quest because I watched that last night with my kid. Galaxy Con in New Orleans in July. So if you want to know my next appearances, I'm looking at Boston. If you're in the Boston area, I'm looking at Chicago. So, make sure that you stay updated. I will not waste a bunch of time chatting because I know that you guys just don't like it when I talk too much, but we've got some coffee because I plan on filming and editing back to back, doing whatever it takes to get this video out to you ASAP. And that video is, what are we talking about? Oh boy, we are talking about Vampire Effect. I found this at a used record store, I want to say. I think I spent like $5 on it, and it's been sitting on my shelf for quite some time. So finally I said to myself, I'm just going to start going through these DVDs and just start seeing what have I seen, what have I not seen, what have I forgotten about, what have I covered, what have I not covered. And so I started pulling things down. So I pulled that one down, and I saw that Mr. Jackie Chan was in it, and I was quite intrigued. So that is what we are going to talk about today. I want to let you know that if you want to watch it, it's now called Twin Effect, not Vampire Effect. I'm not sure why it's called Twin Effect, because nobody in this movie is a twin, but who knows. It is originally in Chinese, but it is dubbed in English. Sometimes I'll read the subtitles, but when I'm trying to pay attention to vampire rules, it's hard to also pay attention to subtitles, so I did do the dubbed version, but you can do it either way, however you would like. If you have never listened to this podcast or watched this channel, spoiler alerts. I talk about everything from beginning to end. I will ruin it for you, so please, if you like to watch the movies first, go check it out. It is available on Prime and the Roku channel, and then come back and join us, because this is it. We are talking about Vampire Effect, a Jackie Chan vampire film. Who would have thought? All right, we open on a young woman who is showing two men and two women an old church as a property to rent. The two men are Kasaf, who is clearly in charge, and Mr. Prada, who is kind of like his sidekick. They really like the building, and to much to the surprise of the real estate agent, they buy the building in cash outright. She's very impressed and very happy. Mr. Prada sees a mosquito land on the real estate agent's neck. She slaps it, and it results in blood on her neck. This sets off the two girls. Their fangs descend, and we see they have two sharp, very long, retractable fangs. Kasaf puts a stop to it And he says, we are part of the royal line and we need to act as such. No sucking, only drinking blood. So we know that they have fangs, that they're retractable, that they do drink blood, and that they can enter churches. So right out of the gate, we learn a pretty good deal about more about the vampires than we normally have to pull that out. But we got to see that right out of the gate. Now we're in a train station. We see a man and a woman are above a train tunnel and they're watching a flock of bats come out, and they say, okay, let's go. And they each drink something. The man says, I'll go first. I'll let you know if I need you. And then he back flips from the train, above the train tunnel, onto the ground. We see his eyes glow briefly. He steps into a train that has just pulled in and appears to be empty. But then he has what I think are visions, and he sees flashes of a bunch of people being attacked on the train. And then we see one man. So a chase ensues. Then there's a flock of bats that attack. Then he encounters one train car that is full of bodies, and one by one they start to rise as vampires. So he has to fight all of these vampires now. His partner is running to help him as he takes the fight out to the platform, out of the train to the platform. She arrives, they both pull swords, they stake the vampires in their hearts, and that turns them to dust. So vampire pause. So these vampires have a mouth full of sharp fangs and very inhuman eyes. And that's much different than we saw in the previous scene. So now we know that there's sort of like royal vampires or master vampires and then lesser vampires, because we see these two different types. Then we see a vampire that's hanging upside down watching the whole fight, and he descends and then he chants something and all the other vampires move to him, and then they all flee together. His coat flies out like wings, which is actually a very cool effect, and clearly I will share as much as I can on YouTube, so if you're watching YouTube you'll get to see it. And now we realize that he's sort of a master vampire, so the vampire brain in me is already churning and saying that must be a master. Now suddenly he has a sword. I don't know where they're getting all these swords. He growls, and then a swirl of mist shoots out of him and he flies up into the air and out of the station. So we know at least the masters can fly. The girl did not survive the fight, and she's carried out by her partner, and then we hear sort of a voiceover. And we learn that they are part of the Anti-Vampire Federation, and that this is the third partner he has lost. So they are part of a hunter's organization. Now we're in a restaurant, and we see Mr. Prada and Kasaf are drinking something that looks like wine. So at this point in time, I'm like, well, maybe they can also drink wine. We don't know yet, but these are the things I have to pay attention to. A young woman named Helen comes into the restaurant and catches her boyfriend cheating. She confronts them about it. They leave, and she walks up to Kasaf's table and says, can I drink that? And she grabs the glass, and he's like, no. But she downs it and then sits down. So we're assuming that's blood that she just drank, and she just doesn't realize it because she's too upset. She explains she caught her boyfriend cheating on her, and then she starts crying. And Kasaf looks smitten right out of the gate, like love at first sight, or intrigued at the very least. He introduces himself and he gets her phone number before she walks away. They go back home, and Mr. Prada is feeding their pet bats, which is very cute, and I will definitely show it. And he's cautioning Kasaf, saying, you need to stay away from humans. And his advice on women, I'll tell you, is something. I'll play it for you.
We can't trust human beings, especially women. They're always so erratic and so touchy. Didn't you notice? First she was crying, then she was laughing. She's a psycho.
If you're on YouTube, he says, what's the point in pursuing her, because she's not going to accept you the way you are. And Kasaf is explaining that he is bored with vampire girls. They're too compliant. They do whatever he wants. I think he doesn't like that. He doesn't like yes women. We find out that his dad sends him fresh blood weekly, and then we see him in a coffin, which is a really nice coffin. It has these like cool lights, and there's speakers so he can listen to music. He calls Helen, but she hangs up on him because it's the middle of the night. And then we see that Mr. Prada sleeps hanging upside down. So I guess you can sleep in a coffin, or you can sleep upside down, just so long as you're outside the sun, out of the sun. That's really all that matters. So now we go back to our hunter, and we find out his name is Reeve, and he is picking up his new partner, Gypsy. And through the course of their conversation, we learn that he is the best hunter in the league, and in his 5 years of hunting, he's killed 123 vampires. We also learn that what they drank before the fight was actually vampire blood extract, and it makes you very strong for about 90 minutes, and then at that point in time, you have to drink the antidote, and if you don't, you'll turn into a vampire. And we find out that he flavors his extract with banana. That way, one, it tastes better, but two, and I'm sorry, the antidote is flavored with banana. One, so it tastes better. Two, so if he like gets stopped and frisked by the police, he could say, oh, it's just banana extract, I bought it to bake. And then he says, I really want you to meet my sister. She's up on the roof. I really want her to like you. And then we go to the roof and see that his sister is Helen, the one that Kasaf is now like pining for. Helen is getting rid of her cheating ex's things when Gypsy comes up, and they do not like each other. First off, there was a hilarious line where Helen is looking at this big teddy bear and she's like, I'd love to keep you, but you look too much like that big fat dumb oaf. And I was like, okay, that's pretty funny. And then Gypsy and Helen get into a fight, so they don't start off very well. Helen then calls Kasaf, and he is thrilled, and he's putting on the Riz.
Well, how about a joke then? Knock, knock.
And then we see a montage of them talking for hours and laughing, and she's doing stuff around the house, and he's on like a scooter, and he's riding around the church and giggling like a little schoolboy. And Kasaf makes a date for the next day at noon, and when he hangs up, Mr. Prada is like, you're gonna burn to a crisp out in the sun. And he's like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. That night we see Reeve and Gypsy are hunting at a dance club, and we find out that, and this is what they say, they were like, it's really weird for European vampires to be this far. So we know that there's like sects of vampires, and apparently the European vampires are very obvious to see compared to like the Chinese vampires. I thought that was interesting. And he said it's very rare to see them here. And then we find out that the royal families, so there are royal vampire families. So there's the royal family of Germany, the royal family of whatever. And one by one, the royal vampire families are being killed by the Duke. This is what we know. And he is killing them to steal the extract of the royal princes. Then we see that the Duke is the master vampire that he fought in the previous scene. So he is now in town looking for the royal family, and we know from the first scene that Kasaf is the royal prince. He is after a book, and once he has this book, the only way he can open it is to have the essence of all 5 vampire princes. The only prince remaining is Kasaf, who happens to have the book because his father sent it to him for safekeeping, probably thinking that the Duke wouldn't come to wherever he is. We see Mr. Prada is whipping up special sunscreen for Kasaf to be able to go in the sun, and they test it in like a really cute scene where he's like so afraid just to stick he's got the sunscreen on his finger and he's just like trying to stick his finger in the sun. It was really cute. They test it and it seems to work, so he goes to meet Helen. He explains to her that he has a blood condition that makes him unsafe in the sun. So he's like he's got like a trench coat, he's covered in sunblock, he's got a hat, sunglasses. So she thinks he's like in disguise because he's embarrassed to be seen with her. So that's why he has to explain. So then their first date is crashing a wedding and like going in and pretending to be the groom's family and eating all the food. So this is when we see that the groom is Jackie Chan. So this is when Jackie Chan shows up. The bride is wasted. The best man has lost the ring. So it's just a disaster of a wedding, and it's a very entertaining scene. Helen overhears that the best man has lost the ring, so he pulls a bat ring off Kasaf and gives it to the best man to try and save the wedding. And at this point in time, we see that little bit of skin on his finger where the ring was is like burning, so he has to hide it in his jacket. The wedding is just this like drama-filled disaster, and Kasaf starts like smoking in the sun, so they have to run out. It was a very entertaining scene. The next night, Gypsy and Reeve are hunting, and we see a big flock of bats, and he explains that's how they know that they're on the right track. So either the bats turn into vampires or bats are where the vampires are. It's not clear to me which one's which. He drinks vampire blood and the fight ensues, and we see that the vampires are extremely agile and they can run up walls. So gravity, they defy gravity. We also see that Gypsy is not a very good fighter. Also a very entertaining scene. The vamps get away. Gypsy forgot to bring the antidote, so they have to run back to the apartment. Helen followed Kasaf home, so now she knows where his resting place is. And she brought him banana muffins to surprise him. Prada thinks she's dinner, but Kasaf stops him. Helen sees the coffin in his room, and they get in it and just like hang out in the coffin, and she hands him the banana. At the apartment, we find out that Helen may have used the vampire antidote to make the banana muffins, thinking it was banana extract. So Reeves eats a bunch of the muffins, and it seems to work. Meanwhile, Kasaf ate some of the banana muffins to try and keep up appearances. So apparently they can eat food? I don't know. We'll question that here in a minute. Mr. Prada tells him, I see you're in love with her. You need to tell her that you're a vampire and see how she handles it. So he tells her the truth, and she does not believe him at first. She's like, if you're just going to break up with me, just say it. So then he shows her his fangs, his real eyes. At first, she's like, I don't know. But then he starts to look really, really bad. And he says, I need blood. She carries him to the hospital where she steals blood. And while she's doing this, Kasaf hears bats, and he's like, we need to go, because he knows vampires are coming. Meanwhile, they try to run, but the vampires attack, so they hide in an ambulance. This is where I want to pause for a second. So I was very confused about this plot point, because he keeps saying, oh, I need blood. But then I was like, no, maybe it's because you took the vampire antidote in the banana cakes. But we never see him eat the banana muffin, so he could have pretended to do that. But I just think it's weird timing. So I thought he was going to turn human because he had eaten the vampire antidote. But she gets him blood, and then he seems to be okay. So I was like, I'm very confused by this whole plot point. I feel like they could have used that more, but whatever. So they're hiding in the ambulance outside of the hospital. And this is when we see that Jackie and his new bride work at the hospital. That's how they met. They find the couple and they agree to drive them to safety because they saved the wedding by giving up a ring. And Helen is like, just feed from me. And this is while the ambulance is like speeding down the highway, and all of these vampires on motorbikes are chasing after the ambulance. And there's a weird scene where one of the vampires like gets up and is standing on the bike with his arms. And I'm like, what is the point of that? There's no reason to do that. Anywho, so the vampires are chasing the ambulance. They fly and land on the top and try and break into the vehicle. So one by one, they're having to fight the vampires off. The last two, if you're not watching me on YouTube, if you're listening, you really need to go check out the YouTube channel, because I'm about to share the scene where the last two are defeated by Jackie throwing antidepressants into their mouths, and then they start to dance because now they're happy. Cakes. And it's so stupid that it's absolutely hilarious. I would watch that scene 100 times. I think I'm going to clip it and start using it on future episodes because it was so funny. The next day, Helen and Gypsy are having a girls' chat, and Helen admits that the guy she's dating is a vampire. So this is when we find out that Helen knows what her brother does for a living. So she clearly knew vampires were real. So I don't know why she was so surprised when Kasaf was like, I'm a vampire. She's like, whatever, if you want to break up with me, just break up with me. So you knew vampires existed. So I'm a little confused here. Anywho. She asks Gypsy, please talk to my brother. Please get him to accept my boyfriend. But before she can say anything, Reeves sees Kasaf's ring and knows something is up. Meanwhile, the Duke is at Kasaf's home/church where he now lives with all his European minions, and they have Prada captive. Helen and Kasaf are on a date at a carnival, and so is Reeve with Gypsy. So Kasaf gives Helen a black wedding dress, which I was like, wow, that's really fast. He's like, look, I got you something. And she opens it up, and it's a black wedding dress. Bro, That you guys have been dating for like a minute. You need to slow down. Reeves sees his sister with a vampire and Gypsy stops him from butting in. So she says she knows what it's like to be in love. So this is when we realize that now Gypsy is in love with Reeve. Again, super fast, you guys. Reeve takes Gypsy to Kasaf's house. He grabs his sword and heads in. So he's trying to show Gypsy that Kasaf is not a good guy. So he takes her to Kasaf's house, but meanwhile the Duke is in there. So Kasaf goes in and sees the Duke sitting on the cross. And then Kasaf is attacked, or not Kasaf, Reeve is attacked by all the minions who now, you know, conveniently have matching cloaks, which I'm like, that's a lot. The Duke has some kind of like detachable Thanos glove, which he shoots at Reeve. So Kasaf and Helen, meanwhile, are back at Helen's apartment making out. Gypsy runs in and she's like, they've got your brother and your boyfriend is the only one who can save him. So they are now all headed to the church. Kasaf faces the Duke and he says, I'll kill you myself so you can't have my blood. The Duke shows him, meanwhile, that they have Prada, and to show him that he is not screwing around, he stabs Prada with the Thanos glove and Prada turns to dust. And I was surprised by this moment because I really liked Prada. I thought he was going to make it through, but no, he got killed. And I was like, bummed. And then another shocker, Reeve is turned. They turned him, which I also did not see happening. So the girls go to save Reeve. They find that he is turned. The Duke now has Kasaf and is extracting his essence. And he pulls out this thing that looks like a peach pit almost. And I guess that's the vampire's essence. So now he has the essence of all of the princes and he starts to open the book. Reeve is trying to kill the girls, so Gypsy stabs him. He regains himself just long enough to finish pushing the sword through his chest, and then he turns to dust. And I was like, I thought they were going to save him somehow. I did not foresee him dying. So the girls go down to the chapel to start killing the vampire minions. And now suddenly they're both very, very good at killing vampires. Okay, all right. At this point in time, I was like so in for the ride. I was totally there for it. So while all this is happening, some kind of big magic vampire ball is coming up out of the book, and the Duke looks very happy about this. And if they explained in the beginning what this book does, I missed it. I think it gives him like all the powers of whatever. It just makes him the most powerful vampire ever, I guess. Editing Lena here from the future. I am editing and I'm trying to get this out to you as quickly as possible, but I went back and I watched the movie and I probably could have guessed, we all probably could have guessed what the point of the book was. The vampire who gets the book, it's the same thing they're all hunting for in every ancient vampire movie trope ever. The vampire who gets a hold of the book and drinks the blood of the original vampire or the strongest vampire can be in the sun. I didn't even need to go back and watch. I probably could have guessed that, but I wanted to make sure that this podcast was accurate. So that was the point of the book. He gets the book, he swallows the super vampire ball, and he can be in the sun. So there you go. So now I can tell you what the book is. So he's looking very happy. So at this point in time, the girls have killed all the minions, and so now they attack him, and he is handing their asses to them. But Gypsy manages to grab part of the magic vampire ball, and it snaps in half. So they each ingest half of this vampire magic ball, and both become like vampire Super Saiyan, and it is the craziest scene. So now they're both super duper strong. So she has black eyes, fangs, visible vasculature, she can fly, she's strong, and her scream breaks glass. So they continue that. Now it's just like a one-on-one battle between the two super vampires. And Helen is trying to help, but she doesn't have any special powers. During the fight, The Duke loses his Thanos glove. So now it seems like a little more of an even playing field. Gypsy turns herself into a tornado. I can't make this stuff up. If you guys are not watching me on YouTube, you need to go watch just to see what I'm trying to describe to you. Turns herself into a tornado. The Duke is knocked down, which gives the girls the moment that they need to work together to get the sword onto him and through his chest. At this point in time, he bursts into dust, and then that dust like turns into a bat, and then the bat explodes. So I guess because he's like a master. And at the very end, like they all come together. It's a happy ending. And we see that Helen, Gypsy, and now Kasaf are like a 3-person team that are out to kill vampires. So they are like starting their own vampire hunting organization, and they are going to go continue to hunt down vampires. So that is Vampire Effect, Jackie Chan's vampire movie. I'm gonna talk about it in a minute. I promise. I'm gonna give you my thoughts, but I want to make sure that we don't lose the parts of my review that you guys really, really seem to like. So, tropes I love and tropes I hate. Let's talk about tropes I hate. I hate the sunscreen means vampires can go in the sun trope. I really, really don't like it. I'm gonna allow it in this one because it gave us the wedding scene, which was so entertaining. I had so much fun with it. I'm gonna allow it. But the other trope I don't like, and I'm not allowing it, is the love at first sight. Like, you guys are so in love in 2 days that you're gonna kill for each other, and you're buying wedding dresses and saying I love you. I don't like that one. Unless you turn it into a long lost love trope, which is you are reincarnated, you're my lost love from 300 years ago reincarnated, then I'll allow it. Tropes I love. I love the dance club as a hunting ground for vampires trope. Love it. Love the scenes where they're walking through the gyrating bodies and there's music and flashing lights and they know that one of them is a vampire. Like, I just love that scene. Also, love vampires searching for the ancient relic that will make them the most powerful trope. Love it. I'm here for it. Wasn't a fan of the Thanos glove, but I loved the whole like ancient book can only be opened by blah 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 and the vampire who gets a hold of it. I love the hunting for an ancient relic trope. Love vampire royalty. Always here for that one. Like there's a special vampire bloodline, vampire royalty, vampire king, queen, whatever. Love that stuff. And we've talked about this before. Love a society of hunters trope. The underground, like Men in Black, but for vampires. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right. Let's do the ratings. How sexy or alluring are the vampires of Vampire Effect? Okay. So the vampires aren't more alluring to humans just because they're vampires. So that automatically lose a few points from that. It's not like Damon Salvatore where he walks in and you can't help yourself, you just want to get naked. They are just like any other awkward person trying to pick you up. And the knock knock jokes, yikes. They don't seem overly sexual. Like Kasaf falls in love just like in the human world, with the same cringe, awkward lines and actions and not knowing if you should kiss or not. They get their honorary point for being vampires. I'll give them 1 because most of them seem to be very attractive, and I'll give them 1 because they can control themselves around humans, so you might get a fun roll in the coffin. They're not going to necessarily murder you, but that's it. I'm going to give them 3 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. How scary or evil are the vampires of Vampire Effect? Being a vampire doesn't make you evil. We know that because Kasaf at the end of the movie is helping hunters now kill bad vampires. The ones under Kasaf do follow the rules about not killing humans. Kasaf himself is sort of silly and not scary at all. I found him extremely charming. I thoroughly enjoyed following his story. They do need blood, so they are going to hit a point where they are going to lose control if they're hungry enough. And there are a lot of them. From the train car scene, it appears that a bite is all it takes because all of these victims are rising, and I doubt he had the time to walk around and pour wrist blood into each person. So we're gonna assume one bite is all it takes. They are very strong. They can fly, they're agile. They seem to travel in packs, it looks like, which makes them pretty dangerous. It doesn't seem like there's, I mean, it seems more like it's infighting. It seems more like vampire clans fighting vampire clans and vampire drama, which does distract them from ever truly like coming together and taking over the world. So I'm not too worried about that stuff. Plus, there's a whole agency of well-trained vampire hunters, but those hunters have to drink vampire blood to be able to fight the vampires. So they're kind of putting themselves at risk every time they do it. They aren't the scariest things I've ever seen, but they do have some very serious power behind them, and I respect it. So I'm going to give them a very respectable 6 out of 10 stakes to the heart for scariness and evil. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you have heard me say this. There are times that I want to quit this podcast because of the absolute garbage I have to subject myself to. But sometimes, because of this podcast, I find a really fun movie that I never would have discovered if it weren't for this, and I have a great time and I'm pleasantly surprised. And that's what this movie was for me. When I picked it up, I was like, oh, this is gonna be terrible. I don't want to do this. You know, I just had to sit through Amityville Vampire, which made me want to jump off a roof. But it's been sitting here. My goal is to watch every vampire movie ever created, so eventually I'm going to have to watch. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Is it going to win an award? No. Is it the best vampire movie of all time? No. It's not even on my list of the best vampire films, but would I watch it again? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think I'm gonna sit down and watch this with my kids. And I even texted the father of my children and I said, I think I found a vampire movie that you would actually watch, because he loves Jackie Chan. And it was so much fun. It's so silly, but it's very entertaining. It's very early 2000s. The graphics are not good. The special effects are terrible. The fights are so overly choreographed, but I had so much fun with it. I just thought it was so much fun. I don't think the vampires were super thought out. I think it just felt like a fun foe. I loved the relationship between Kasaf and Prada. They just felt like best friends that have been together for a really long time. I feel like Prada was originally just assigned to Kasaf because he is the prince, but now they genuinely love each other and they're like best friends. I was very sad when he died. I thought Kasaf was so likable. I wished he had fought more in the final battle, but I guess having his essence pulled out kind of put him down for a while. I do love that they all hunt together now. I definitely would have watched a sequel if they had made it. Apparently there's a twin effect too, but I was reading, I don't think it has a lot to do with vampires. I will take a look into it. If I'm wrong, I will let you know. I will bring it back here. I have seen so much worse. I definitely am going to sit down and watch it again, and this time just pop some popcorn when I don't have to take notes and keep pausing, and just turn it on and just have some fun with it and turn on the surround sound and have a good time. It is available on Prime, like I told you, but it's called The Twins Effect. And I say give it a chance, especially if you know someone who would never watch a vampire movie, but they love sort of the martial arts, kung fu genre, especially if they love Jackie Chan. Like, the jokes are so corny. I just love it. I highly recommend putting this one on to watch. Next week, we are going to do another one that is a random DVD that I grabbed. It's been sitting there, I don't even know how long. I feel like I must have watched this at some point, but I don't remember. And that is Dario Argento's Dracula. So we all know Dario Argento is a horror icon. You know, Suspiria is one of those ones that I will watch over and over and over again. So I'm very excited to see what he did with Dracula. It's referred to as a very sexy Dracula. We haven't had a sexy movie in a while, so I'm here for it. And the guy who plays Dracula in this has played Van Helsing in something else, so that's pretty exciting. So join me next week, Dario Argento's Dracula. It is available on Tubi if you'd like to watch it before you watch my review. Thank you again for being so patient with me as I had to handle other things. I tried to record ahead just in case stuff happens, but I just haven't, because I've been focusing on writing this book. So I thank you. I love you guys so much. I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.
And big finish. Thank you.